I got to read my script. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Scott County Board of Commissioners, I would like to welcome you to tonight's board meeting where we will be discussing the proposed 2025 county budget and tax levy. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to attend our meeting. The purpose of the public meeting is to explain the proposed budget and levy for 2025 and to obtain your input into this proposed 2025 budget. Some of you may be present to talk about your market values or property classification. During this meeting, we will not be discussing individual values or classifications. The Pay 2025 notices of value and classification were sent out last March with your 2024 tax statement. The right to appeal your classification and/or value is listed on that notice at various dates, times, and locations. The county's Board of Appeal and Equalization meeting is held in June of each year. We do have county staff present who are available to sit down with you individually to discuss your valuation and answer any questions you may have. Feel free to meet with the county assessor and his staff now or after the meeting. This evening's meeting is limited to the county budget and the factors that make up the budget. Although market valuation variables are a component of the budget, they are not the central purpose of tonight's meeting. You are welcome to ask questions and provide comments into the county's budget and tax levy following the presentation. At this time, I will turn the public meeting over to Deputy County Administrator Danny Lenz, who will lead our discussion this evening. Mr. Lenz, thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner and members of the audience. We are here to talk about the 2025 budget. We are here for the budget hearing. So this is one of the last steps in a budget process that really begins with a presentation back in June. We have numerous meetings over the course of that time in order to develop what results in this final budget before the board. If I can get this moving, sorry. Commissioner Wickman-Bricky, I don't think we can see you now when I'm doing this. So the primary agenda items for here is to talk about the 2025 budget, our financial forecast, and then some data related to the impact on residents from this final budget. So we've had consistent board policy and directions for many years in order to provide long-term fiscal stability while minimizing tax impacts, a reasonable level and constant tax burden, modeling limited and relatively level increases, and managing limited resources over unlimited demands and provide the level of services necessary to meet mandates and citizen expectations. We do this in order to maintain fiscal stability. So a structurally balanced budget that also includes meeting employee needs, resident needs, and meeting our mandates, maintaining the county's reserves or fund balance, maintaining the county's AAA bond rating, plan and prepare for the future, and don't spike the levy and no surprises. So the current budget status, revenue increases were less than last year, but up from the forecast, so 3.1% increase. We also had some losses in identified revenue from contracted case management administration holdback, and then it does incorporate forecasted revenue from the CCBHC designation that we've recently received. Personnel costs are the primary driver for this budget. A highly competitive job market has really pushed up the cost and competition for talent, including also a 13% health insurance increases, which is larger than we've seen in the recent past for the county. Contract increases also continue to have a significant impact, making up a significant chunk of those increases. So it's contracted services that we're seeing increases largely due to inflation that are causing those contracts to go up. And then we do have a structure change that was recommended to the board at the board planning workshop that has been included in this budget. And all of this makes up for a 6.8% levy increase for the current budget. These are the new expenditures we have within this budget. So it's bargaining and agreed salary increases, that health insurance increase. The largest kind of line is that contractual licensing cost increase. That's almost $750,000. $537,000 in lost contracted case management revenue. A $400,000 2024 budget error correction. The $404,000 for the grade structure change. $400,000 for ARPA position feathering into the budget, and $46,000 for the 2022 position that's being feathered in. $50,000 increase in funeral and final disposition program, which is a state mandated program for the county to participate in the cost share. A levy neutral position for the veteran services position, and then one-time cost for radio system contracts and facilities to build an inventory of commonly used parts. As we look at our financial forecast, the forecast from 2026 to 2029 includes the following assumptions: 1% revenue growth. This is just based on the volatility in state revenue. We've stopped expecting larger increases. Salary increases per our union contracts. an 8.15% health insurance increase for 2026, and then 5% after that. $300,000 increase to the CIP through 2027, and a $200,000 increase to fund balance through 2028. That also includes the last year of parks funding increase as part of their 10-year plan for bringing online several parks. Other ARPA-funded project feathering in. Increased family leave legislation impact, which is a larger impact we're expecting for next year. And then $1 million in each year in contractual increases in order to plan for those continuing to grow contract costs. So this is looking what's in each year. I won't go through them all. I'll call it a couple of ones though. So if you look in 2026, we have over $1 million for the impact of the family leave legislation.
Yeah, Danny, sorry, quick question. I mean,
Yes.
going back to page 9, a lot of these line items are things that we are actively working with the state to try to put some level of, I don't know if a lid on is the right description, but to try to, well, not just on page 9 for that matter, but things that we are actively working on so that they fully understand the impact out here in the field.
That is absolutely correct,
But
Commissioner.
between now and in 2 weeks.
The state, because of the mandated services we have, has a significant impact on our budget by decisions they make or don't make. And so frequently, this budget is really a reflection of state policy choices when we get to the this time of the year.
Well, and for the many viewers and folks, however you want to say that, I just think it's important to hear that we're not coming up with this stuff. It's backed into a corner also while we're trying to fight, kicking and screaming some of these new mandates.
Yeah, I would say for this budget, there is nothing that we don't have to do being incorporated in here. These are all things that either we have to do in order to stay competitive with staffing, or we have to do because of a state mandate in order to do it.
Thanks.
So speaking of those, for 2026, over $1 million that we have to budget for family leave legislation. That's going to be coming through beginning in 2026. We do have $500,000 that is being a reduction to the road and bridge levy because of new funding sources that are coming through from the state as well. So that's one that the state did help us a little bit. 2027 is a bigger year though. That's the last, when all the final ARPA expenses need to come either onto our budget or be eliminated. So that assumes that these will all be continued going forward. If you look at the truancy diversion and the St. David's line there, those are really based on if data supports the continuation of those, the decision we made for that 2027 budget. We do have library open access funding included in here. That's an ARPA project to provide that extended hours at our library. Sustaining support for the Family Resource Center. And then another item from the state, $450,000 in lost community corrections fee revenue from recent legislation. As we get into 2028 and 2029, and ARPA's kind of built its way through our budget, really not a lot of impacts. We do have $2 million in debt service that is going to be falling off and moving that into a future building repair replacement needs account for the county's budget to handle any of those larger building things as opposed to having to go into debt for it. So this is the financial model for our levy and percentage increase. The red line is our actual tax levy in dollars. The blue line is the percentage increase from one year to the next. You'll see that we're in a period where we're forecasting to be relatively high, especially compared to our historical levels, and then dropping back down in 2028 and 2029. Again, the primary drivers for this are salary and benefits costs, and then the lower assumption and revenue from the state not keeping pace with what we need to cover the cost of salaries for state mandated services. That green line at the bottom shows the percentage of taxable market value that our levy costs our residents. So if you take all of the taxable market value in the county and you have it divide our levy, that's where you get that 0.314%. And we always want that to be going down. You'll see we have the slightest uptick this year. It's a little bit higher levy, but we do forecast it going down into the future. And this is our operating budget and fund balance. So the yellow line is our actual operating budget in dollars, and this would include all of the revenue sources we have, not just levy, but also any fees as well as grants. The red line shows our fund balance in dollars, so $48.6 million in fund balance is what we expect starting in 2025. The blue line, if you take the red line and divide it by the yellow line, gives you that blue line at the top, and that shows the percentage of our operating budget that we have in fund balance at any given time. And the green line shows the level of we do not want to go below for 5% of our levy. So we really look at it at the lowest points of our year when our revenues are at the lowest before we get those first tax payments. If that's where we're going to be sitting at, that 5% of fund balance, we don't want it to drop below that 5 percentage point line. And then this is one of our indicators for the budget. This is our net levy compared to new construction and inflation combined. For this year, it is 4.84% for our CPI and new construction, with our net levy being 6.8. This is an indicator. This is not a restriction for us. As you can see, we've been significantly lower the new construction and inflation in past years. And I believe that a lot of those contractual increases are being driven by that inflation that hit in 22 and 23 and are working their way through the places that we contract with, and we're seeing those maximum kind of increases take place within those contracts. And just to show a little bit of history with the forecast, and we went through this at our budget workshop, but just kind of showing back in 2019 where we had forecasted. So this was for the 2019 budget, if you look at that top line, and where we had forecasted our levy to be. And as you can see, in some years we're close, but then when you get into 2021, the impacts of COVID, where we actually used fund balance in order to finalize the budget, driving it down, going back up to really kind of where we've been historically. Different impacts in 2023 that caused levy to be higher, not having state revenue, and then having an influx of state revenue in 2024 and not kind of having that same impact for 2025. So there's a lot of variability, and again, what the state does has a significant impact on how we put together what our final levy is going to be. So this is a newer chart that we've had for this presentation. So this shows the county levy versus the taxable market value and personal income growth for the county. So this is normalized. So looking back at 2001 being year zero and everything being at 100, taking the growth percentage for each of these. So that top line is, the blue one is the taxable market value. The green line is personal income, and then that bottom line is the levy, showing that our levy has been significantly lower in its percentage increases than the taxable market value or personal income. This one shows county levy versus inflation plus growth. So as we just showed, we had our CPI plus new construction. This is a different way of looking at inflation plus growth. So the green line at the top, if you combine the percentage growth in inflation and population increase, it hovers a little bit above that blue line, which is the increase in our levy. So our levy really is driven by cost increases and growth in population for the county. This is the population for Scott County as the orange line, and you see the growth in our FTE as the blue line. Again, we're not growing our staffing at the same rate that the population is growing, so this is a rate, not an actual apples to apples number, but it's made to be so that we can validate it against itself. And then this is the growth in county expenditures by our major service areas. So that top green line is what we would say are state mandated services, largely driven by health and human services. The blue line is our general government line. The purple line is public safety. The highway transit is the orange line, and then culture and recreation is the green line. You can see that for those areas that are not that green state mandated level, it's fairly level increases and pretty stable in terms of the growth, just as we have a growing population. But that state line goes up and down quite a bit more, especially in recent years. And what I would say is wherever that state line, the top line of it, sets our new bottom line for our budget. Because as the state increases their funding and then it falls off, it doesn't change the mandates that we have in terms of providing services. So when we talk about impacts to residents, so this is residential properties with property tax increases or decreases. And you see for this year that a little over almost 30,800 residential properties are going to see a tax increase between $10 to $100, and then tapering off on either direction. So between $9 and negative $9, 4,230, and then actually seeing a property tax decrease for 3,661 residential properties. This slide shows, looking back 5 years of what a tax, or 10 years of what a property would have paid in taxes compared to now. So the top line for that home value is $259,000. That was the average value home in 2016. Going to the bottom line, $450,000. That is the average value home for this year and what they would be paying for their 2025 taxes. So as you can see, a home at $450,000, if it had stayed steady in value, would have had their county taxes go from $1,630 down to $1,216. Trying to show different ways we do pay very much attention and try to not impact our residents with our tax levy growth. This is our 10-year tax rate. So looking back to 2016 again, we have been steadily going down. This is the first year in some time where we've had a small uptick in that tax rate. Largely driving that big decline down between 2022 and 2023 was the significant increase in property values that happened over that time, that caused a big jump down in that tax rate, and seeing a smaller increase in values this year causes that tax rate to dip up a little bit, or to tick up a little bit. This shows the FTEs per 1,000 residents by county. So looking at other area metro counties, you can see Scott County is near the bottom of this, where we have historically been near the bottom. In fact, there's only one county that has a lower ratio of FTEs per 1,000 residents by these counties. We're also one of the few that ratio has gone down in this time as opposed to going up. The levy as a percentage of the county's annual budget is another indicator we look at. This is more just for reference of how much the state decisions are having an impact on us. You can see that for a while there in 2020 through 2022, we had ticked down to just being a little bit over 50%. We've ticked up almost 2 percentage points from 2024 to 2025 in the levy supporting the operating budget more than we have the trajectory we wanted to be on. And then for the capital budget, I would just note that because this does include major projects and we have grant money that funds through this, is why you see the volatility and how much of the levy makes up for it. If we have bigger project years, that levy is going, and lots of grant dollars coming in for those projects, that levy percentage is going to be smaller. If we have fewer grant funded projects that are in there, that percentage is going to be higher as a portion of it, but overall spending in there would actually be down then. This is the county tax levy per capita. You can see this is one that has had a steady increase. In 2020, we were at $471 per capita in the county. For this year, we're at $553. We don't have the number for all communities yet, as that number comes in a little bit later. But again, you see that kind of same trend where it's been slowly ticking up, just as the cost grows as well as the population growing. And then the county levy as a percentage of total personal income, one that we really look at. You can see that for both Scott County and all communities, the most recent data we have is from 2023. It comes out in November of 2024 for last year. You can see we've gone from 0.73% of personal income that the county takes in order to operate its budget, going down to 0.63% for 2023. So a drop of 1/10 of a percentage point. And when you're dealing with those small numbers, that's a pretty significant drop. And again, for all communities, going from 3.02% to 2.66% for total personal income. So our next step, December 17th, we're going to be adopting the final levy and budget again back here in this boardroom, kind of concluding the budget process. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Colleagues, any questions? Commissioner Ulrich.
Just curious about one question. It's kind of the way I used to look at the tax statement when I wasn't involved in any of this. I'd look and I'd go, well, okay, there's three main large taxers here. There's a school district, there's a city, and there's a county. And back at that time, this was, late 90s when I was doing this, I'd go, it looks kind of almost like a third. And over time, the county is no longer close to a third. Is there any way to comment on that? I mean, it seems like the other units of government, school districts and city have grown at a higher rate than the county has.
So I don't know that I have a comment specifically to that. I do think that there are different variables that go into each of these different things. The school districts have state mandates and state funding streams. Cities don't have the state funding streams that we have, but ours are a lot more volatile, right? So school district has a change and it's one line. For us, the state could make a change in one area that provides revenue and other areas that drops it. We see that a lot where we're getting good news on this side, but we get that final budget and all of a sudden we're $500,000 less in another program area because of the volume of funding streams. But that's why we use so many of these metrics to try and make sure that our levy is not really going up and up and up at that same rate. The other thing I would note is that the percentage levy increase that we talk about is not a tax percentage. We do not set a tax rate in the county. We set a levy, and it equates to a tax rate on a back-end calculation, which is where we look at that at the back end. Frequently, when we're doing a levy increase, about 40% of the homes see a tax increase, about 60% see a tax decrease because of the formulation change. But we're looking at growth of new construction, those sorts of things. A lot of times our residents are seeing their taxes going down, despite what we're doing with the levy, because we're talking about the percentage increase of how much taxes we had from last year, not an increase in the tax rate.
Thank you.
Any questions down here? Commissioner Weckman-Brecky, I can't see on the screen, but if you have any questions?
No comments, no comments. Sounds good, exactly what you discussed.
So I've got one question, the 14-15 page where, it's the modeling. I see young Mr. Jones in the back here, maybe Dr. Jones, I don't know, maybe that's new. So we do the best we can with all this modeling, looking at these 5-year runs.
Looking at this page?
No, it's the 5-year run rates.
Yep.
And really, it's just more of a question is, so much of what you even mentioned and so much of what we do, like, here's our modeling on the things that we can control, which is very little, and then the state changes, ratios, the math, and blue, red, seems like it doesn't really matter. So it just feels like this type of program is not sustainable.
I think there's some questions on sustainability when we look at where our revenues are, when we look at having to put cash into our fund balance, which we hadn't had to do previously. We've recently changed our modeling. If you look back to 2022's year, we were looking at 3.5 until just above 3 or right below it in the modeling. Because of what we were seeing in revenues from the state, we changed our forecasting because it was just coming a consistent pattern that revenues were not coming in reliably. And so you can see for that 2023 year, we're up closer to 6% there, and would have been there in 2024, except for a large influx of state funding in that year. But again, that money becomes part of the budget. We look at the next year and we're going straight back up, because the revenues that are increasing aren't keeping pace with the actual our cost increases when you talk about personnel costs.
Well, and we've workshopped these things, so these are just kind of new questions that have, because I'm just wondering, like, with our Scott County delivers and earlier today, and, what are your peers saying and the others? I mean, we're not the only one feeling it, so, like, how do we really band together to push this back uphill? Because this is not sustainable. We're doing all of this work executed by statute, most of it from the state and feds, but oftentimes the money's not attached, right? We all know that. So how do we collectively come together and really make that change so that it's sustainable for people? Because it is just a runaway.
I think the county already does a lot of that when we look at our local communities through scale. And I do think that the commissioners have been putting forth an effort to try and engage some of our state groups to say, some of these things can't continue on this way. We have to change the trajectory because our residents are bearing the cost of this for decisions that U5 can't control. And so that doesn't seem like it's the way that our residents intended this to run.
Any other questions from up here? All right, I have a little blurb to read here post-presentation. So if anyone has any comments or questions on tonight's hearing, which is specific to the Scott County 2025 budget and proposed levy, please feel free to come on up and take 5 minutes of your time if you would like to ask any question you might have, if there's any takers. And if you could just give your name and address for the record, please, sir.
Jay Olson, 9280 Overland Drive, Credit River. I've been to a lot of these meetings and I've never won an argument at all for my taxes over time. And they always refer me back to, it's got to get back into the county planning. You can't be talking, you're at the tail of the dog when you come and talk to us about your tax bill. You got to get involved in the minutia. And I tried to get involved with the minutia tonight, and I was late. And I'm sorry. So I'm going to keep this at 30,000 feet instead of getting into the minutia. But is there any concerted effort, because my taxes went up from $2,100 on the county level to $2,400 for my property, and it seems to be the culture, from my impression, from my exposure of it's personnel costs, it's this. And is there any concerted effort to say, our goal is to drive these costs down? No, we want them to be down, but can we drive them down? Most responsive government that I got involved with was in Credit River when I moved in 1999. And Zweber sat there at the meeting at the old garage there, and he said, we got a road grader problem with a tire on the road grader. And I talked to Lakeville, they got a tire, it's sitting in their garage. And I went over there and said, can I get that tire? And they said, yeah. Well, what are you gonna do for me? Well, we'll plow judicial 2 years in a row. So they horse traded the tire. Now, to me, that was the best example of responsive government I've ever seen. It worked. Now, I get it that it's bigger, and they certainly at Credit River don't have a place like this to meet in, though they'd like to. And but I would encourage that the commissioners say, we got to drill these costs down. There has got to be a creative, common sense approach to drill costs down. And it could be change. There could be some sort of big change that we have to deal with. But that's why you're here, is to make those changes. And look at, I'm not paying another $300-400 a year, coming back and saying, okay, it's okay. You know, and this gentleman here is well-versed on his numbers and the graphs and the whole bit, that you just cannot, it's a tsunami. And I just want to know that as commissioners that you're creative, tapping that creative form or vein to drive and drill these costs down as much as we are, and justifying why they're going up.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I would comment, Mr. Chair, and Jim, you're in my district.
Jake,
Jay, sorry, I couldn't hear.
still in your district.
Yes,
Nice.
same city. You know, we go starting, is it July or August, and we go through every supervisor and every single position in this county. Do you need this? Do you need that? And it's hours. How many hours do we spend? The first years, it was 50+ hours. This last 40 hours, every position. And, you know, we're in a market right now where the wages, we're losing people, whether it's deputies or health, we're losing assessor's office. We lose them to other places. They're getting paid higher. And so that's the reality of what we're in right now. And we're trying to change that. We started out, was it 8.9 or something? We ended up at 6. So we have to pay the taxes too. And believe me, I don't think any of us like it either. So, but thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate this.
Well, and I would just add the flip side of that too is, like, it keeps me up at night, and I'll let the others speak for themselves, it's not sustainable. You just heard me ask those questions. So many of these things get flushed down to us at the local level without the proper funding, because I'm sure you pay Minnesota income tax, as I do, and Scott County tax and city tax and schools and all the other taxes. It's not sustainable. So yes, we want to try to drive down costs, but costs like labor is going through the roof. Everything's going through the roof. But how do we, if you're going to tell us we need to do things, then fund them out of that proper tax base?
Well, and
You got to come up to the,
sorry.
otherwise
Sorry. I get it, in owning a business, you gotta make hard choices.
Yep.
I grew up on spaghetti and butter.
Sure.
My wife grew up on spaghetti, and it got to a point where you can, put more on. That's great. That's a goal. Now, that's a private business goal, maybe not so much as government. But I guess my point is, there's hard choices that have to be made.
Yep.
And these hard choices are hard choices, and I know that there's a priority. Our priority in we got to meet the payroll. We got to meet the payroll. We got to pay our vendors. And you know who the last person to get paid on this whole thing?
I do. Yep.
Yeah. And so I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that hard choices, and I mean hard choices, have to be made in order for it to change. Otherwise, it just keeps rumbling down the road. It keeps rumbling down the road, And we have meetings like this and we talk about this. The bottom line is that we need to say, look, I don't know the solution, but I know there's a solution. And it's a matter of facing the music, of saying there's hard choices that have to be made. We do without is what it comes down to. We do without. My kids know what spaghetti and butter is all about, you see. So,
Thank you, thank you. And hopefully you're feeling the love tonight that we're holding this meeting just for you. So thank you for coming. Thank you for taking the time, and hopefully you bring some friends, because this is an opportunity thank you for, yes, thank you for coming, so.
Mr. Chair, Jody.
I was just going to say, earlier tonight, we had a discussion about adult mental health and the mandates that are put on us, and the cost of working with that, and the creativity that our staff is doing in order to still address the issue of adult mental health. And it's not just, oh, we're just going to go out and do whatever we have to. We come up with creative ways to resolve it so that it's not an issue that snowballs for a person or for a community. We're taking care of things creatively and coming up with solutions. So we look at that every day, and our staff looks at it every day. We also go to the state and work really hard to present our issues to the state legislatures so that they are aware of the impacts that they have in their decisions on us as a county resident and a county. So we work really hard.
one quick question. Do you guys have a balanced budget that is mandated for you? You got to balance your budget.
Yeah, no deficit spending. Okay, any further questions? Otherwise, I don't think we need a motion. No, Brent, no motion?